There had been reports of a leak of radioactive waste outside the harbor from a plant that used atomic isotopes. As a member of the Coast Guard Auxiliary, I had volunteered to check the area using a new type of underwater radiation detector. So far, there was no evidence of any contamination. My radiation detector had a dial which measured the amount of radioactivity and an audio device which translated it into clicks. This was to be my final dive on the assignment. The entire channel seemed well within the safe limits. I was heading for the surface when it happened. I hadn't noticed a sound mounting in the distance. I was in the direct path of a large freighter which was approaching overhead. I started to dive to a safe depth. The clicks in my detector were so rapid that I thought something had gone wrong with it. The needle had moved way up into the zone of extreme radioactivity. The reaction was coming from the freighter passing overhead. There was no question of it. I couldn't imagine what it could be carrying to give such a reading. But whatever it was a dangerously hot cargo. I'd have to tip off the Coast Guard immediately. The next morning, I was called in by Commander Greer of the Coast Guard. I figured that he wanted to tell me what they found in the port inspection.
Mike, I personally took charge of our routine inspection, which in this case wasn't routine. You know something? There wasn't a trace of radioactivity aboard that freighter.
Well, that's hard to believe.
Mike, we went over that ship with a fine-tooth comb. It's clean.
But that reading I got, it had to be caused by something extremely radioactive.
Then what happened to it? We're certain that it didn't come ashore and it's not on that ship.
Well, of course, you checked it from above. I was below when I got my reading. If that material were attached to her hull, yet somehow shielded from it, you wouldn't have been able to have detected it from above, would you?
That's true.
You mind if I check it from below again?
Okay, Mike. But be careful. If you're right, it means trouble.
I was careful. I slipped into the water as unobtrusively as possible. I descended to a depth of 40 feet. Then I started swimming toward the freighter. I moved in very cautiously. If my detector had been right, there was enough radioactivity there to cook me. The chain and the prow revealed only a normal background reading. Then I started checking the starboard side of the hull. I kept as close to the hull as possible so my bubbles wouldn't be noticed on the surface.
Corbett. Now there, sir. Those bubbles. Air bubbles from a diver. Where did you first notice them? Amidship, sir? He's inspecting our hull.
But we've had port inspection.
I don't like the looks of it.
Colonel, I did exactly as I was instructed.
They know something.
I didn't find a thing. You suppose they got rid of it somehow before they reached port?
You mean on another boat?
Or a sub, maybe.
No. We had that freighter under air surveillance within 2 minutes after your call. There's another explanation. Are you going to be someplace where I can get in touch with you later?
Oh, I'll be at my place. You got my number, haven't you?
All right, I'll call you. I might have an interesting assignment for you.
I had made my own investigation, but I was more puzzled than ever. The next morning, I was at the Coast Guard base on volunteer duty when I saw Commander Greer drive up. Ah, Commander.
Like that assignment that I mentioned. It's been okay. That is, if you still want to volunteer for it.
Just name it.
Remember all those talks we had about the possibility of someday you organizing an underwater flotilla for us?
Don't tell me it's finally gonna happen. You mean
I mean, we need that flotilla now.
Oh, that's great.
Now, it's an assignment that's tough. It could be dangerous. How many divers could you have ready for briefing?
Well, I only got about 5, maybe 6 in my regular flotilla that I'd consider, experienced enough for a job like this.
All right, you use your own discretion about that. Now, Mike, what I tell you now is for the moment strictly confidential.
Yeah?
This is going to be an underseas hunt, Mike, for that radioactive material. Notify your men to report here for briefing at 1700 hours. Tell them as little as possible, except that they have to volunteer. It's confidential and dangerous.
The deck of a Coast Guard cutter served as our briefing room. I explained our plan of search in detail.
Well, Mike, we still don't know exactly what we're looking for.
No, we don't know what it looks like, or what size it is. It could be very small. But we do know that it's something so radioactive that it could fry us if we get too close to it for too many seconds. That's why we'll be working with an underwater radiation detector like this one. It'll be our main protection.
Is there any chance of it exploding?
No, it's not an atomic bomb. My detector wouldn't have given me a reading if it were. But radiation and contamination are just as dangerous. Any more questions? We have got a couple of things working in our favor, though. One of them is water. It's a very good shield against radiation. And the other, of course, is this little gadget. Just be sure that you keep your eyes glued to it every second while you're down there, huh?
One more thing, gentlemen. Although this is the first underwater mission for a flotilla, there may never be a more important one. Whatever it is those people dropped, we've got to find it before they can get it ashore. More depends upon this than you can realize.
Well, I think we've covered about everything. Better start getting organized now. Looks like tomorrow's going to be a big day. Yeah, I'll check you out separately on this counter here, huh? Commander Greer and I had chosen the area for the search based on what we knew of the freighter's course. What's the matter, Commander? Something wrong?
No, I was curious about that boat over there, but I guess it's just one of those harbor fishing boats.
Looks like we're gonna get a break. Nice day.
That Coast Guard cutter. It's got divers aboard. They're on our course.
I'll give orders to head back.
I'm giving the orders. We'll maintain our course. Notify me when we've reached the spot.
If those other divers see you down there, you won't...
I'll be one of them. In these outfits with the masks on, all divers look alike.
We had reached the sector charted for our first dive, the one that we thought most likely to hold our target. Our underwater search had begun. It was carefully planned and systematic. The cutter was set on a known course at a steady speed. On timed signals, we were dropping markers so that they would hit the bottom at 30-foot intervals. The markers were concrete hemispheres, striped for easy spotting. We had attached inflated buoys to the concrete blocks on long lines. These buoys would be our surface markers. When all the markers were overboard, we turned and retraced our course. This time, a diver jumped off and submerged next to each floating buoy. Each diver immediately swam down to his concrete marker on the bottom. I had to see that they followed the correct procedure after that. The plan was for each diver to tie the line that he carried to the marker and swim in a wide circular pattern. He had to watch and listen to the underwater radiation detector all the time. The lines were long enough so that the patterns would overlap. My flotilla members were good divers, but none of them had ever before had to conduct an underwater operation with such discipline and precision. Another diver was preparing to submerge. He was not part of our group. I was in command of the 1st Underwater Flotilla of the Coast Guard Auxiliary. We had volunteered to find a tiny bit of dangerously radioactive, hot cargo lying somewhere in acres of ocean bottom. We were so occupied with our work that we didn't notice the arrival of another diver, differently equipped. He studied our actions. We were nearing the end of our first diving period. In a few minutes, we'd complete the pattern of the first sector. Then we'd have to surface for rest and for a full set of tanks. Stan began to get a slightly higher reading on his meter from an object that he discovered in the bottom. He followed instructions and immediately inflated a marker buoy. When I saw the metal container that he'd found, I thought that our search was over. But I soon saw that the reading wasn't anywhere near high enough. I sent Stan right up, as our maximum safe time was over. My tank had only a few minutes of air left, too. I was going to surface with the others when I saw another diver. I could see immediately that he wasn't one of the flotilla, because he was carrying a long boat hook. Somehow I sensed what he was going to do with it. Unless I was very mistaken, he would lead me right to what we were searching for. I stayed as far behind as I could without losing him. When he reached his objective and I saw it, I knew that there was no mistake this time. It was a lead cylinder with a plate on it that might have held it to a hull. The diver was attaching a line to the container. He was using the boat hook to keep as far away from the radiation as possible. He started to tow away the cylinder. I knew I had almost no airlift. I also knew that I couldn't let this diver get away. I wasn't sure how far we were from the cutter, but I had to follow him. When the diver surfaced next to a boat with one end of the line, I figured that he'd soon start towing the cylinder away. I'd have to do something fast. The only thing that I could think of was to cut the line, but I couldn't get too close to the container for too long. It was hot, all right. My knife cut through the fiber strands, but the line had a wire core. The line was being hauled up. I tried to keep my distance from the cylinder.
I can't understand why he hasn't surfaced yet, sir.
You'd better get down there with your boys.
Come on, fellas. Let's find out what happened to Mike.
Start the engines. Let's get out of here.
Then I heard the motor starting. The propeller wasn't engaged yet. If I could wrap the line in it and get away in time, I might cut the line or stop the boat.
The screw must be fouled.
I'm going down again. We can't get stuck here.
He saw me. I knew I had less than a minute of air left. If I didn't disarm him in that time, I was finished. Experienced diver. He knew all the tricks. I had already gone into my emergency air supply. Now it was running out. I knew that it was only a matter of seconds before I was helpless. Knife was gone. I took my last breath. He realized that I was out of air. He knew all that he had to do was to keep me from surfacing. I'd be dead in seconds. I was almost blacked out when my flotilla arrived and pulled the diver off me. Stan realized that I needed air. He quickly gave me some from his air hose. The diver was still struggling viciously, but he was no match for an underwater flotilla. We had loaded the hot cargo into a heavy lead container underwater. In that way, the water shielded us somewhat from the radiation. Now it was being carefully brought aboard. I knew that Commander Greer was anxious to have a description of the capsule.
It's a lead cylinder, about 3 feet long, about 7 inches in diameter, with a steel plate attached to it. I guess the whole thing was attached to the bottom of the boat with an electromagnet inside. When they wanted to get rid of it, they just switched off the current.
That's it, all right.
That's what?
Mike, when I gave you the go-ahead, I'd received a report that I couldn't discuss.
That figures.
Now, this is still strictly for you. But you see, intelligence knew all about that container. Everything except where and how. It's packed with radioactive cesium powder.
Cesium?
The idea was to have it handy to slip into the water supply at a crucial moment.
Boy. That could have wiped out hundreds of thousands of people.
Could have. Thanks.
Oh, you got nothing to worry about now, Commander. It's perfectly safe.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you all for volunteering and for the great job that you've done. Those men you captured have been turned over to the FBI. But there won't be any headlines about this incident, and your pictures won't be in the papers. You can't tell your family and your friends about it. So the only ones who'll know are the bunch of us right here and Coast Guard headquarters in Washington. And you can be very sure that they'll know. And that the first thing that'll be said about our first underwater flotilla is, well done. Well done.
I'll be back next week at the same time with another sea hunt story. Plan to be with us again, huh?